Hey everyone, today we're going to go over the basics of Excel, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to start your own worksheet. First, when you open Excel, you'll see you have access to your recently used files, as well as a few templates, and then many more templates if you click more templates here. But for the sake of this video, we're going to do what I usually do, and that's start with a blank workbook. And now that we have our blank workbook, I'm going to save it using the Save button in the top left corner. And then when you save for the first time, you can name your file. So I'm going to name this Excel tutorial, since that's what this is. And we can choose where we save this file. You have the default location, but I will click more locations. And then when I hit browse, you can pick anywhere in your files. So for now, let's go to downloads, put this in my YouTube folder. And under the YouTube folder, we have our Sheets folder. And this is where we keep all our spreadsheets for our videos. So we will save this worksheet here by hitting save. And then we can replace the one that we already made earlier. Yes. And now, anytime you make other changes, all you have to do is click the save button, since you already saved it into a certain spot, and everything will be saved for you. So the first thing I'm going to do to make everything a little easier to see is zoom in on this spreadsheet. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner, we have this zoom bar where you can scroll to zoom in, and then you can also scroll back to the left to zoom out, and you can also hit the minus button to zoom out and the plus button to zoom in. For this spreadsheet, we will leave it on a 200% zoom for now. So this file that we named Excel tutorial is known as your workbook or your worksheet. Within a workbook, you can have different tabs. So you can see this is sheet 1. If we hit the plus arrow, we now have a second sheet. So this is our second tab or second sheet within our workbook. You'll also notice, if we go back to sheet 1, that when you right click on a tab, you'll have different options for what you can do. You can delete this tab, you can rename it. So let's rename this tutorial. This is the tutorial tab. And then if we right click again, we can do things like change the color of this tab. So let's make this green. And this just helps for organization and presentational purposes. So within your sheet at the top, you have different columns. So we have column A, column B, column C. And when I click on the column header, I select the entire column. As for rows, we have row 1, row 2, row 3. And like columns, if I click on the row header, which are numbers instead of letters, I will select the entire row. The intersection of a column in a row is known as a cell. So the intersection of column D in row 5 is cell D5. And this is where we can enter in our information. So let's type in, for example, the number 50, and this is in cell D5. You can select a range of cells by clicking on a cell and dragging to the right or dragging down or doing both, like this. This is what we call a range, and this range would be known as D5 to G10 because it encapsulates all the cells from D5 to G10. And we'll look at this a little bit later, but to denote a range, it will look something like this, D5 colon G10. And that is the range that we just selected. If we want to get rid of this cell that we just filled out, D5 to G10, I can hit the delete key on my keyboard and that data will go away. Up above our cells here, we have in the top left what is known as the name box. And you can see the name box says G5 because that is the cell I'm currently selected into. The name box could be useful for a few things, but one example is, say I want to get down to cell G500 in my worksheet. Instead of scrolling all the way down, I can just go into the name box and type G500 and hit enter, and I will now be transported back to there. And I will now be transported to that cell. But let's move back to the top by typing in G5, hit enter, and now we are back up at the top. Next to the name box, we have this larger region, which is known as the formula bar. If you type information in here, it will also go to the cell that you currently have selected. So if we go back to the number 50 that we typed in earlier, you can tell that this is in D5, which you can see in the name box, and you can tell because it's column D and row 5. And you can see in the formula bar the number 50 displaying. There are a few other important Excel mechanics we need to point out, and one is about moving cells. So let's say you meant to put this number 50 in cell C4 instead of D5. What you could do is delete the 50 and then type it in cell C4. But another way you can do that is by moving cells. And when you hover on the border of a cell, you see this intersecting arrows button pop up. When that pops up, you can click and then drag over to cell C4, and your cell and its contents and its formatting will have moved over. Another thing is copying and pasting. The quickest way to do that is if you're selected on cell C4 and you hit Control C, it will copy your cell contents. And now you can tell it's copied because it is highlighted and moving around. And then if we highlight another range and hit Control V for paste, the number 50 will paste into those cells. Let's say you didn't mean to do that and you want to get rid of all those extra number 50s. Instead of deleting each of them, you can hit Control Z, which is the undo button. And then if we hit Escape, we will no longer be copying cell C4. But another way you can copy cells is by using what is called the fill handle. And you see in the cell, it's highlighted green, or it's outlined green rather. That's how you know it's selected. But if you look at the bottom right, there's this little box. If you hover over that, an intersection across will show up, and you can drag that all the way across, and it will copy the cell contents, similarly to copying and pasting. But for now, let's undo that, which you can hit Control Z, or you can just hit the undo button in the top left corner of your screen. So let's undo. And now another thing about the fill handle is it's smart. It recognizes patterns. So let's say in cell D4, we had the number 51 typed in, and we want to highlight across, increasing by 1 every single time. Excel will recognize this pattern if we start by highlighting cells C4 and D5. Now, if we drag this across, instead of copying and pasting, Excel will add 1 each time. And this will work with many other patterns as well. So let's say we're starting a chart here and we want to enter in the days of the week. If we type in Monday and select it and drag it across, Monday through Friday will automatically be populated. Now, a formatting issue that you'll commonly see, and we see because Wednesday doesn't quite fit into the cell. If you look in the formula bar, you can see Wednesday is filled out because that's what's in this cell, but the cell is a little too small to fit that. So what we can do, if we click and select column E, we're now highlighting and selecting this entire column. If we move our cursor to the border of this cell, so just left of this right border, you see this little icon pop up across with arrows on the left and right side. If we double click, now the column size will be adjusted to fit the contents. The only issue now is that column E is a little bit wider than the rest of them, and we want our columns to be symmetrical. So there's a few different ways to do this, but the easiest one would probably be to use the Format Painter. So if we have column E selected, and then we click this Format Painter button in the top left, which is a very important button, let's select it. Now if we click on C, the format of column C now copies what is in column E. So now that we have column C collected, we can now double click Format Painter, which means this will hold the Format Painter. So we can click on D, and now we can then click on F and G. If you don't double click after the first time you paint the format, the option will go away. And now we can hit Escape to get out of this. So now what I'm going to do is start to make this a coherent table. So let's say this first row is burger sales, then we have hot dogs, fries, and soda, and then eventually we will have a total, and we'll say that this chart is Brian's Burgers weekly sales, and it's broken down by day and by product. And real quick, I'm just going to fill out the rest of the contents and then come back. Okay, now we have a coherent chart of sales for burgers, hot dogs, fries, and soda by all the days of the week, Monday through Friday. But this chart still feels a little cold and it doesn't quite look right. So now I'm going to talk about some of the formatting options you can do to make your sheet look better. To start, let's look at the title of this chart, Brian's Burgers Weekly Sales. I want this chart to be centered above, or I want this title of the chart rather, to be centered above all of our data. So what you could do is hit the Merge and Center button, which will merge all the cells that we selected, and then center the text. Already looking a little better. Another thing I can do, if I hit Control B, I can bold this title. Rather than hitting Control B, you could also go up to bold here and select it or deselect it as you will. Another tool I commonly like to use for my charts is to use borders. So if I highlight all of our chart and then I go to borders up here, I can hit this drop down arrow to see many different border options, but I'm just going to select all borders. So now we have borders throughout this whole chart. And then we can also use colors to make this a little bit better. So if we go into the title again, we can make the title a dark blue, but the black text doesn't really look great with that. So let's change the font color to white. And then for our headers under the title, let's make this another blue. And already this looks way better, and it just takes a few simple clicks. After this, the best part about Excel is that you can use formulas and functions. And formulas and functions aren't exactly the same thing because functions oftentimes have special uses unique to that function. Let me show you some examples of formulas first down below. So let's say we have the number 5 and the number 10, and we want to add these numbers together. So one way you could do this in column F is you can hit equals and then 5 plus 10 and then hit enter, and now you have the number 15. But what if this first number changes to 6? Now you're going to have to go back and change this to equals 6 plus 10. A better way to do this is if you hit equals and then D10 plus E10 and hit enter. So now your formula is summing the contents of these two cells. So now what happens if we go back to D10 and say this number changes back to 5? Watch this. If you type in 5 and hit enter, you'll see that our formula changed from 16 to 15 because you were just summing the contents of these two cells. So that's addition. And then let's say we change this plus to a minus, 5 minus 10. You'll see that's negative 5. If we did 5 times 10 using an asterisk and hit enter, you'll get 50. And then if we do divided by 10 using a slash and hit enter, you'll get 0.5. So that's the basics of formulas. Parentheses and other things can go into that as well, but that's basically your addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now that we know how formulas work, we can move on to some functions, and I'll start with some of the basic functions. So in our total in column H, we want to know the total burgers sold for the week. So using formulas like we just did, we could do equals C4 plus D4 plus E4 plus F4 plus G4, but there's an easier way to do this, and that's the sum function. So if we type in equals sum, and then we open our parentheses to include our data, all we have to do is highlight the range from C4 to G4, denoted by C4 colon G4. Then we close our parentheses to finish our formula, and we hit enter, and you'll see the sum of 260 burgers sold for the week. Then if we click on this sum C4 to G4, and then we select the fill handle and drag this down, the formula will drag down properly, whereas for hot dogs, it's summing C5 to G5, which is the range we want. Now let's hit escape and let's go into column I. Let's look at the average function. So the average function is basically the same thing as the sum function, except you're averaging totals. So if we go into cell I4 and type in equals average, open our parentheses, select our data, Monday through Friday, close our parentheses, you'll see on average 52 burgers were sold per day. And then if we use the fill handle to drag this down, you'll get the average for every product. And real quick for this formatting, one simple trick, if we highlight the total section, click on Format Painter like we did before, and then apply that to average, you'll see the borders will fill in as they did in the total section. And for the title of the chart, we want to merge and center with this cell I. If we select the merge and center button, it will unmerge and uncenter. And if we click it one more time, it will merge and center, including cell I2. Now, if we go back down to below the chart here, we hit delete to get rid of this information. Some other easy functions for data analysis are maximum and minimum. So let's do maximum here, and then minimum, if I can spell it, right underneath. So the maximum function is simply equals max, open parentheses, and if we highlight from the totals and close our parentheses, you'll see the maximum for any one product for the week was 260 items sold. And if we type in equals min, open our parentheses, highlight our range, and close our parentheses, the minimum was 99 of a certain product sold for the week. And let's say, for example, we had borders and we had colors for maximum and minimum, but then we decided this is kind of useless information. We don't need this. So you might think, oh, let me highlight this range and hit delete. Oh, but the colors are still there. The borders are still there. That's annoying. How do I get rid of that? So if we undo, and now we have all of this information in here, all you have to do to revert these cells back to normal is first highlight all of them and have them selected. And then if you go up into the ribbon, by the way, this is called the ribbon. And within the ribbon, we have the home tab, the insert tab, the draw tab, all these different tabs. This is known as the ribbon. So let's go back to the home tab. And within the ribbon, off to the right, we have this editing group. And in the editing group, you see this clear button. If we just click that, and you can see there's different options. You can clear the formats, clear the contents. We're going to clear all. And now everything from those cells will go back to the default cell options. And let's say the average is also useless too, but we want to replace this with something else. So we don't want to clear everything. We just want to clear out the data. Like I did before, you could hit the delete key, or if you highlight this data and then right click on it, you see all the different options you have here. You can simply click clear contents, and the contents will go away, but the formatting will stay, and we want it to stay. So let's call this the charity column, and we'll title it that. And one other quick thing for formatting, just to make this look a little bit better, the total and charity columns, I'm going to color a light gray. We'll do this one so that you can see they're different from the contents Monday through Friday. So for this charity column, let's say that for every item we sell, we make a donation. And we'll denote that off to the right. And let's say that donation is 50 cents. So 0.5, but 0.5 what? We want to display this as currency. And you can see up top we have the number group, and there's many different options. If we click on this little arrow, you will get a dialog box that shows you all the different options. For this, let's use the accounting option, and you'll see the sample of what it looks like. Okay, $0.50, perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. And you can edit this to your liking, but let's hit OK for now. And then let's also highlight this mini little chart off to the right and create borders around it. So now we have a donation of 50 cents. And now let's pretend that for every product we sell, we donate 50 cents to charity on that sale. So simply, if we go into charity in I4 and we type in equals the total times 50 cents, the donation, and hit enter, you'll see that we donate $130 on the week for our 260 burgers sold. Makes sense. Now let's apply this to hot dogs, fries, and soda as well by clicking on charity and dragging this all the way down. But there's an issue. None of them are filling out with anything when you can clearly see that items are sold. So to understand what's happening, let's go into our formulas. So the first formula is working. You can see the cells are highlighting blue and red. We have total times the donation. If we hit escape, and then we go into the charity donations for hot dogs, and we click in here, you can see the issue. It is H5 times K5. If we go down to fries, H6 times K6. And you can see what's happening. When we drag down the formula, yes, the reference for H was dragging down, which we wanted it to, but we wanted the donation reference to stay the same. So what we have in our formula is called a relative cell reference, where this formula for hot dogs is relative to the formula for burgers. So H4 times K4, we drag down, and it's still the same relativity in that we are multiplying the cell that's 1 to the left and 2 to the right, because for burgers, we were multiplying the cell 1 to the left and 2 to the right of the cell where our formula is. So what we want to do is create an absolute cell reference where we drag this formula down, but the donation stays the same. And to create an absolute cell reference, if we go into our formula bar, we can add a $ in front of our numbers and letters. And then if we hit enter and drag that down, the cell reference for K4 stays because it's an absolute reference. So you can see soda is multiplying the 99 sodas sold times the 50 cents donation. But let's undo that real quick. And I'm going to show you a key shortcut that's going to help, because it is kind of annoying sometimes to click in and add multiple $ in between things. So if you click into the formula bar and just hit the F4 key, it will do that job for you. So let's hit enter and drag this down. And now our charity column is using an absolute cell reference to multiply our sales times the donation per sale. And now this table is done, but one of the last things I want to show you is how to use charts in Excel, because that's what a lot of people use Excel for. So for our chart, we want to display the amount sold for all the days of the week. We won't do the totals or the charity for the chart. We just want the amount sold by product for every day of the week. So if we highlight this range, Monday through Friday and burgers through soda, then let's go up to the Insert tab. Within the Insert tab, you see this charts group right in the middle. And there are many different options, but Excel will also recommend charts to you based on what it thinks is best for your data. So let's hit recommended charts. And when you do that, you see all these different previews of charts and how they might look. We have a clustered chart and many different options, but I like this stacked column chart. And then we can hit OK. And you'll see we have every day of the week, and all the products are denoted by this key at the bottom. And we don't want this chart to be named chart title. So if we click into chart title, we can get rid of that. And let's name it weekly sales. And then there are many different ways you can customize your chart. But if you go to the top and click on these newly populated tabs, let's go to chart design tab. You can see these default chart styles, these templates that pop up for you. And let's see, there's a lot of different ones. I kind of like how this one looks. So we'll click on style 6 and it will apply for you. And I won't go too much further into charts because that can probably get its own video. But now let's say you were preparing this worksheet for your boss. You can save it. Let's maybe zoom out a little bit. And then we can take this chart, put it under the table here, make it fit a little bit better. And now you have a good report to hand in. One last little tip I'll share for presentation purposes. If you go into the View tab, you'll see in the Show group grid lines. The grid lines are just the little gray lines telling you where rows and columns are. If we unselect that, you'll see it is now blank. And that might look a little bit better for you for printing or taking screenshots of certain things. And now you have a coherent report that looks good as well. So that's it. If you're still listening, that means you made it to the end and you completed the basic tutorial for Microsoft Excel. If you want a little more of an in-depth tutorial or want me to go more in-depth on certain aspects like charts or formulas, let me know and I'd be happy to make more videos like this one. So I hope you learned something in this video. If you did, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet already. Thanks for watching.